Hi, I'm Abby. I have a lot of records, and this is Vinyl Monday. So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Vinyl Monday is the who, what, when, where, why, and how do I feel about classic albums in my collection. If TV show length episodes aren't your thing, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds here on my channel, over on my Instagram, as well as TikTok. In my absence, my routine break weeks that I've come to normalize on this channel, thank God, a podcast episode about the wonderful Dusty Springfield went up, my July vinyl collection update went up over on Patreon, and I posted a blog-exclusive Blonde on Blonde 60th anniversary retrospective. Hi! Editing Abby dropping in. You'll hear from me a couple more times through this episode. This episode was delayed by a week. Migraine's gonna migraine. Nothing new here. These have affected episodes before, but in that time, another awesome podcast episode about the Queen of Funk, Betty Davis, went up. And we had a special guest, author of the upcoming Betty Davis biography, Danielle Maggio. This was an awesome interview, one of my favorites we've ever done, and Betty was just the coolest. This is an episode you won't want to miss. Links in the description, blah, blah, blah. Okay, announcement time over, bye. Speaking of the Dylan multiverse, that is where this week's album brings us. I don't know about you, but I need a thorough detox from psychedelia after all of the prog, psych, jazz fusion we've had on this channel. And spoiler alert, we will be spending the rest of the month there. Today's band acted as a detox too after years of psychedelia. This week's album is The Band, aka The Brown Album. Congrats if you guessed this one. Remember, if you want to play along, all you gotta do is check out my post tab. That's where I post the hints to what the next album is gonna be. I make announcements, I host polls, you can find all of that on my channel. And if you so choose, you can always read the written versions of my reviews on my website, linked in the description. Alright, let's take the plastic off. So my copy is a repress on the red Capitol Records labels. I think this would date it to the early to mid 70s, especially when you consider the gold record certification stamp. You most certainly do not get those on originals. Speaking of which, let's talk about this cover art. The Brown Album cover was photographed by Elliot Landy, designed by Bob Cato. In and around their community of Woodstock, the band had this reputation of being this very insular group and really stoic. These are 5 guys who dressed like they were in the Dust Bowl, and who knows, they might have been living like it too. What if they were a cult? In reality, this was a jovial group of guys who knew how to have a great time. Yes, they did have modern amenities, but you wouldn't know it from this photo. And that is because to get this photo, Elliot stuck these guys and their leather and suede jackets in the middle of the woods in the pouring rain. As you can imagine, they weren't too cheerful about that. We've placed our track listing and album credits on the back because on the gatefold, we've got some snapshots of the guys playing both in their pool house and live. More about both later. I see why they stuck these shots on the inside because it kind of breaks that Dust Bowl illusion if they have electricity and are photographed in color. On the Brown Album, we have the one, the only, The Band, consisting of Levon Helm on drums, mandolin on Rag Mama Rag and Rockin' Chair, rhythm guitar on Jemima Surrender, singing lead vocals on Rag Mama Rag, The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down, up on Cripple Creek, Jemima Surrender, and singing co-lead on Whispering Pines and Rockin' Chair. Yeah, a lot covered by one person. Robbie Robertson on guitar, Rick Danko on bass, fiddle, trombone, and singing lead on When You Awake, Lookout Cleveland, and Unfaithful Servant, Garth Hudson playing organ, clavinet, piano, accordion, trombone, and saxophones, and Richard Manuel on piano, harmonica, bari sax, lead vocals on Across the Great Divide, Whispering Pines, Jawbone, and singing co-lead with Levon on Rockin' Chair. Richard also plays drums on Rag Mama Rag, Jemima Surrender, and possibly When You Awake? By nature of how the band worked, this isn't 100% clear. The Brown album was produced by John Simon, who also plays keys, horns, and the tuba. Roll transition.
Standing by your window in pain.
Though the Byrds' Sweetheart of the Rodeo was the birth of the country rock genre as we know it, critics began labeling the band and their debut, Music from Big Pink, as country rock. Take the New York Times review of Big Pink, for example. Quote, "Fortunately, we needn't wait for the Byrds to understand what the country rock synthesis is all about. Already, the movement has its first major album, Music from Big Pink by the band." Levon said country rock was the label that finally stuck. We hated it. Why did Big Pink hit as hard as it did? Well, the Dylan connection for one. People were clamoring for something, anything from their Messiah since he'd crashed his bike and disappeared a year and a half before. But this music wasn't Bob. It wasn't rock and roll, it wasn't folk, it definitely wasn't country. Though still a little rough around the edges on this album, the sound was so unique to the band, and it really rocked the boat. Not just any album can break up Cream. Psychedelia naturally burned off. The novelty of extendo guitar and drum solos, light shows, and free love, man, had naturally worn off over a few years. And you have to consider the world this album came into. The innocence of these kids were interrupted by multiple high-profile political assassinations, chaos at the DNC, Richard Nixon's election in November, the natural response to hippie hedonism overload, and dare I say the generational trauma of having your optimism destroyed in front of you, is for the pendulum to swing back. Despite the Dylan connection and almost immediate critical adulation of this album, Big Pink was not a commercial hit in the States. The Wait didn't even crack the top 50. It's safe to say that the band's upward career trajectory was tempered by the band themselves. Basically, they saw what happened with their old boss, Bob, and the insane star worship that came with him, and wanted to avoid that for themselves for as long as possible. They turned away most any interview opportunity until they absolutely could not do so anymore, and they had to send out Robbie. He was the press guy back in the Hawks days, so he just reprised his role. Levon said, quote, "We never did want to take that full throttle sort of commercial gear. I never wanted to be recognized on the street and mobbed. As for write-ups in the press, we tried to keep it on a review basis as much as we could. We hoped they'd review the record and leave our personalities out of it." The band wouldn't, and for a while couldn't, tour. When I tell you, the band were the most accident-prone group of guys in rock and roll to date. Rick wrapped his car around a tree, broke his neck and his back in 4 places, somehow survives. Levon, freshly recovered from his own motorcycle accident, rolls his car on a back road, and Richard burns a hole in his fucking foot when his grill exploded. Needless to say, they were grounded for a few months. Robbie used the downtime to write. These new songs, plus Big Pink leftovers, had the band boasting of 3 complete albums worth of material in the can. Capitol Records caught wind of that and said, "Yeah, sounds great, boys. How about you use some of that material to pay off your medical bills?" Once the Three Stooges were back on their feet, the band were back in business and ready to record. Since a lot of these songs were written during Big Pink production, it made sense to replicate the Big Pink environment. But the mythology surrounding Dylan, and now the band too, made it impossible to do such at Big Pink. Prying Eyes forced them out in '68, so where do we go? It. Sammy Davis Jr.'s house. Levon borrows 10 grand from a friend in Arkansas, so the guys, their wives and girlfriends, their families, and all their gear can temporarily relocate to sunny California. And they tore the place apart. They plugged up the chimney, they sealed off the fireplace, they blacked out the windows, and nailed baffles to the walls of the pool house. Despite the fact that this place was basically a construction site for the first 2 weeks, when the guys all lived together, their creativity was really able to flow, considering their proximity to each other and their gear. It's kind of hard not to work together when you're all living on top of each other, literally. Levon lived on the second floor of the pool house over the showers. Quote, "It came as the height of our collaboration. We were all at our fullest." Robbie said to the NME, quote, "It was very cozy recording on our own with nobody looking over your shoulder and making you stick to schedules. It was also a miracle that it worked because we'd gone out there with this harebrained idea and actually pulled it off. Put an asterisk next to that because they just barely pulled it off." The Brown album was recorded from February through April of 1969. However, the guys couldn't actually start working until March because the console the Capitol Records sent out to California arrived a month late. So this chill clubhouse atmosphere very quickly turned into manic all-nighters fueled by diet pills, cheap and easy amphetamines, to record as much as they possibly could in 1 month. Why did they have a hard deadline? Because Bill Graham did have to fork over 20 grand to do it, but he finally got the band's first public shows as the band, nearly 2 years into their history, and they hadn't played a public live show. All they'd done so far was the Woody Guthrie Memorial Benefit, and that was a closed show and with Bob. This was on their own in front of 5,000 people. Despite what we may believe, the band were not miracle workers. They didn't finish the record before they had to be in San Francisco. Cripple Creek, Whispering Pines, and Jemima Surrender had to be recorded at the Hit Factory in New York after the Fillmore East shows. The Winterland shows also marked the first time in nearly 3 years that the band were on the road. And it wasn't gonna go smoothly. Robbie got sick on the plane to San Francisco. He tried to rally for sound check, but he just couldn't do it. In a rare turn of character that I honestly didn't expect hearing what I have heard about this guy, it was Bill Graham who suggested that the Thursday night show be postponed to Sunday. It was the band's manager, Al Grossman, who refused. These guys are on a schedule. They have an album to finish. I don't care if we have to hypnotize Robbie Robertson. The band plays tonight. Say, what was that you said about hypnotizing Robbie? In a turn of events, you have to see to believe. Al phoned up a hypnotist to make Robbie's sickness go away. I don't think any of us would believe this actually happened had Elliot Landy not been there to photograph it. Here are the pictures. Here is the hypnotist. Here is Robbie Robertson. Robbie is now under whatever woo spell this is, but this still doesn't change the fact that the band did not rehearse without him, and according to Levon, because of the way the Fillmore guys set up the band's gear on night one, they didn't have their usual sight lines. The sight lines were so important for the band because there were so many of them and they all needed to be able to respond to what the other was doing. They couldn't do that at this show. According to Grail Marcus, who was there as a member of the press that first night, the band fell apart before the crowd's very eyes. They turned and ran. The crowd's hopeful energy had been suspended between disappointment and desire, and it collapsed into fury. The band's first concert ended with an outpouring of anger and rage unlike anything I have ever seen at a rock and roll show. Robbie turned green again, and the band had to tap out after about a half hour to a chorus they were all too familiar with from their days of playing with Bob. This was inevitable. Anything less than a picture-perfect show would have got this reaction, and a picture-perfect show with no rehearsal was simply impossible. The mythology of the band was impossible for the actual band to live up to. For what it's worth, the rest of the Winterland and Fillmore shows were great. Quote, "The first time in 4 years we hadn't been booed." They go out to New York, record those last 3 songs, back to the album. Both Levon and Robbie have said that the album could have been called America, but the actual working title was Harvest. Robbie said, "It was like we'd planted our seed, and this was the fruit that we were finally getting from all the work we'd done. Nearly a decade of work, mind you, from when Levon first joined Ronnie Hawkins and the Hawks to now." But Capitol went with The Band, a self-titled record, to clear up any lingering confusion about what this band was actually called. The track listing of The Band, the Brown Album as we've come to know it, goes as follows. Opening up side 1, we have Across the Great Divide, followed by Rag Mama Rag. Then, The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down. Next, When You Awake, Up on Cripple Creek, and side 1 closes with Whispering Pines. Opening up side 2, we have Jemima Surrender, followed by Rockin' Chair. Then, Look Out Cleveland. Next, Jawbone. Then, The Unfaithful Servant. And the album closes with King Harvest, with the subtitle Has Surely Come. The hype for this thing was ridiculous at this point. The Brown Album was released on September 22nd, 1969. Up on Cripple Creek, Backed with Dixie was the promo single. It peaked at number 25 in the States. The A-side of this single inspired another hit song at the turn of the decade. I asked Corky Lang about this, and he told me that when the band and Mountain were on the Festival Express together, he told Levon that Cripple Creek had inspired the Queen and went so far as to offer him a writing credit. Levon politely declined. Rag Mama Rag, backed with Unfaithful Servant, was released as a single early the next year. It only peaked at number 57 here, but became their greatest hit in the UK, peaking at number 16. The album peaked at number 9. As we can see from this little stamp, it went gold. Famous fans included 2 Beatles and, not him again! I really thought we were rounding a corner here. About a month before the Brown Album's release, the band played one of their most important gigs to date, the Woodstock Music and Arts Fair. It seemed to be a good set. They learned from their mistakes at Toronto Pop, both by organizers and themselves. However, due to the single greatest mistake of Al Grossman's entire managerial career, none of the band's set made it into either the original cut of the film or the soundtrack. And this was down to some classic rock and roll rights fury. Al did not sign the release form. Bootlegs of the set itself have circulated for decades. The soundboard recording was finally officially released as part of the 50th anniversary edition box set. Janis Joplin's set, and I believe Blood, Sweat, and Tears as well, have appeared in subsequent anniversary editions of the Woodstock film. They were the other artists affected by Al's big goof. None of the footage of the band has ever surfaced, and at this point, with all 5 guys and Al gone, I don't think we ever will. Speaking of bootlegs, surprise! The Basement Tapes have entered the chat! So if you'll remember, Bob got in this mysterious motorcycle accident back in '66, holes up in Woodstock to get his shit together. That's how the band wound up in the Woodstock area in the first place. This is a genuine copy of the Great White Wonder bootleg. It consists of songs that Bob and the band recorded together that Bob gave to Al Grossman, which Grossman then shopped to other artists like the Byrds. This included I Shall Be Released, which the band recorded themselves, for Big Pink. Bob's demos leaked from his publisher. A couple of Dylan freaks out in LA got a hold of them. As the story goes, they knew a guy who worked at a distributor, and Great White Wonder was born. You have to understand that the narrative up until the summer of 1969, when these started moving around, was that Dylan was injured so badly that from July of 1966 through 1967, he could not work. This disproved it. This was a revelation. Not only had Bob been working this entire time, it was looking like the single most prolific period in his entire songwriting career, and that's because it was. And the band performed 2 Basement Tape songs at Woodstock: Don't You Tell Henry and Ain't No More Cain. This only intensified the hullabaloo surrounding Bob's return at Isle of Wight that year, which the band also played at, and this interview that the band's old boss, Ronnie Hawkins, gave that was what I can only describe as a certifiable PR nightmare. Quote, "The Hawks' vivid account of whoring and pill-popping wasn't what we were about anymore, even if it was pretty funny. But the party was over. The same week as Woodstock, across the country, the Tate LaBianca murders and the following trials through the next year brought the 1960s to a horrifying, abrupt end. The Boomer and Zoomer generations are more alike than either group would ever admit. One key difference that I will identify is that my generation doesn't have an exact equivalent to the shock that was the senseless, brutal, highly publicized murder of this beloved actress just weeks away from giving birth to her first child. The ugliness of the conspiracies that arose in the wake of her killing are still appalling to this day. If this could happen to such a beautiful, innocent person and her equally innocent friends who just happened to be at her house that night, what could happen to us? What could they do to us? The wave of paranoia that followed the Tate LaBianca murders and the subsequent Manson trial circus set the tone for the separatism that would define the new decade. When we were younger, of course, we always wanted to change the world and thought we could. But now I think we're smart enough to know that we're here to help the neighborhood. Now the band were rich and famous rock stars. They left the mountain to buy big houses, appeared on the cover of Time magazine and The Ed Sullivan Show. In time, they found that success spoiled the real fun. Egos, drugs, yes men, and the loss of the brotherly spirit slowly killed the band. Of the years following the Brown album, Rick said, "Ever make $1 million fast? Well, I have. And it's a crying shame what success can do." So, what do I think of the Brown album?
Unfaithful servant.
In his Across the Great Divide text, Barney Hoskins said that the Brown album was a concept album about the American South. Robbie himself said it wasn't. Quote, "We aren't going in with any concept idea, but it may seem like it when we're through." In the VH1 Classic Albums installment on the Brown album, Grail Marcus said, "I think it felt like a passport back to America for people who'd become so estranged from their own country that they felt like foreigners, even when they were in it. We're in a similar position now. The bicentennial looked nothing like America 250, and that's for a reason." Grail wrote, quote, "The songs captured the yearning for home and the fact of displacement that ruled our lives. We thought that the band's music was the most natural parallel to our hopes, ambitions, and doubts." Think about it. By the time of this album's release, the country was unrecognizable from the country these kids knew just a few short years before. They'd seen so much in so few years. Bay of Pigs, Kennedy shot, the British invasion, cannabis, civil rights, Vietnam, the Watts riots, LSD, Dr. King killed, another Kennedy shot, Chicago, Nixon, Woodstock, Manson, and the moon landing. All the while, they feared the Russians would render them a smoldering cinder block flying through space at any moment. Morcus identified the one thing I've never seemed to put my finger on in all my coverage of the Back to Basics movement over the years. This music, while a retreat, reunited American youth with their history, which the breakneck speed of modern history had alienated them from. Quote, "There is no feeling of being dragged back into the past for a history lesson. If anything, the past catches up with us." And I agree to an extent. There is something magical about all the songs on Big Pink and the Brown Album being written before the band had ever played live under this name. But did the band themselves have any of these grand visions in mind when they were writing this stuff? Despite what Levon and Robbie would tell you in retrospect, no. This was the audience's response. The album in its greater cultural context, baby. For the band themselves, the Brown Album was simply a test to see, does lightning strike twice? Yes, it does. What carried over from Big Pink? The guys worked in isolation with older, tried-and-true influences. They used staple singers-style vocals, a homey blend of instruments, and captured a relaxed and inviting atmosphere. It invokes wood panel, town hall, potluck dinners with square dancing, coming home to warm apple pie, the ideal of America. But where Big Pink sounds thin at times, having listened over a year later, way on the high end, the guys elaborated on their sound with a little extra sweetening for the Brown Album. We are welcomed into the fold with Across the Great Divide, an exquisite blend of brass provided by Richard, Rick, Garth, and John Simon. In this song, Richard plays a cheatin' husband talking his wife Molly off the ledge. Over top of that sweet, sweet blend of horns, the husband begs for his life. Standing by your window in pain, a pistol in your hand, and I beg you, dear Molly girl, try and understand your man the best you can. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. In between the Temptations and apparently the pinball machine, we get the down-home group vocal chorus. Across the Great Divide, just grab your hat and take that ride. The call to adventure, a classic way to kick off an album. And he'll venture out into the unknown by any means necessary. Into the verses, I'm gonna leave this one-horse town, had to stall till the fall, now I'm gonna crawl across the Great Divide. Get yourself a bride and bring your children down to the riverside. Simple pleasures. The guys play a steady sway driven by Richard's piano. Put that with Molly and her gun, and you get the consequences of messing up life's simplest pleasures with worldly desires. What a mental picture. He promises he'll come home to her. You'll feed your man chicken every Sunday, but he still doesn't 100% trust that she won't kill him in his sleep, and honestly valid. Wise that he thought to ask, "Now, hun, what ya done with the gun?" Rag Mama Rag started as straight rock and roll, but it didn't stay that way for long. The guitar riff became Rick's opening fiddle. It would be easy for a song with a lot of brass and no bass to sag mama sag, but the band's advantage was their strong rhythm, pulled from rock and roll and rockabilly. Rick said, quote, "People don't understand how complicated the band's music is until they sit down and try to play it. It's like rare jazz. When you listen, there's a lot going on. The arrangement of Rag Mama Rag is a carefully choreographed dance. The tuba plays the bass line, the mandolin fills in the rhythm, only a little electric guitar in there because Bob had soloed Robbie to death on the 66 tour, and it really changed his playing style. Rag has a few meanings in Rag Mama Rag. Dancing the rag, other kind of dancing, and nagging. We could be relaxing in my sleeping bag, but all you want to do for me, mama, is rag, mama, rag. I just want to sleep with you, but damn it, woman, stop nagging me to do things. Levon was the right choice to sing this song. He has the inherent charisma needed to deliver it. He shares the charisma with the arrangement. His spirit, plus the rhythm, the fiddle, and the brass just makes you want to get up and dance the rag. After we got the fun stuff out of the way, buckle up. Dixie's gonna be a long one. In the current cultural context of 2026, we have to handle The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down with some nuance. Obviously, the transatlantic slave trade was wrong. Dixie never tries to redeem the Confederacy. Levon and Robbie instead show us a human perspective of events that, while yes, we, the listener, are 150 years removed from, this is a perspective that existed long before Dixie and long after. The common man on the wrong side of war. Virgil Kane is my name, and I served on the Danville train, till Stoneman's cavalry came and tore up the tracks again. Virgil Kane is fiction, but his story is pretty real. A poor white farmer in Tennessee who became a soldier for the Confederacy. He was posted to defend the train that brought Confederate President Jefferson Davis south when Richmond, the Confederate capital, fell. Union General Stoneman's cavalry tore up the tracks of the Danville line. This was to destroy anything that could help the Confederacy and help General Robert E. Lee escape. We learn a lot about Virgil Kane in 3 minutes. The war has cost him everything he had. His farm, his community, and his own brother, who was also a soldier. Levon's voice brings Virgil to life. He has a humble power when he sings, "You take what you need and you leave the rest, but they never should have taken the very best." As does the arrangement. It pulls back to piano chords and drums before this big push into the final chorus with a distant victory horn. Now, I want to break down the etymology of Virgil Kane, the name, because it has a lot to do with my interpretation of Dixie. Virgil was a Roman poet, Dante's Guide Through the Inferno. Cain was one of the sons of Adam and Eve. He killed his brother out of jealousy, a mortal sin, and was condemned by God to roam the earth for the rest of his life and bear the mark of Cain. Virgil Kane is both our guide through the hell that was the post-war South, where hunger and crime were rampant as various sieges starved thousands. It was the winter of '65, we were hungry, just barely alive, and he's our sinner. Having partaken in the sin of war, as everyone has in this scene, I interpret this as the simple acknowledgement that a sinner is a whole lot easier to relate to than a saint. About Dixie, Jonathan Taplin said, quote, "It was such an amazing point of view on the South and what Levon and the people he had grown up with went through. You know, I always had a kind of a classic redneck stereotype in my head, and in just one 4-minute piece, that all changed." It's even more amazing that a song like this came from Robbie. They cleverly edit around it in the classic album's documentary, but Taplin totally misremembered the lyric of Dixie as being written by Levon. Levon grew up there. His parents' farm was surrounded by sharecroppers, and he would go to the library with Robbie to read historical texts, took him to meet his parents on the farm in Arkansas. As it stands on the Brown album and in the band's discography, Dixie was the high point of Robbie and Levon's friendship. Robbie wrote this song for Levon to sing, and Levon gave Robbie the perspective to do it. Because, quote, "What was he, if not a Yankee, with his nose pressed up against the window of the South? As am I." From a northerner, a very northerner, I interpret The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down as showing that in war, everyone loses. With the American Civil War specifically, over 150 years later, we still see the ramifications in so many different ways. The cultures of the North and the South have never really reunited. Southern states are still so much poorer than the North. Northerners still look at the South as a bunch of dumb hicks when in reality, the South is not a monolith. Black Americans who have consistently pioneered American popular culture still face deeply ingrained injustices in both northern and southern cities. We have all lost. So, before the rest of you Yankees roll your eyes at Dixie and write it off as the South will rise again, listen to Virgil when he tells us, I swear by the mud below my feet, you can't raise a Cain when he's in defeat. The South will never rise again. Dixie is an incredible song because over 150 years after its setting and nearly 60 years after its recording, it's still so illuminating today. The mood lightens significantly with a gorgeous wash of Garth's Lowry and Robbie's electric guitar arpeggio. When You Awake is a tender moment between grandfather and grandson. My grandparents did a lot of the work in raising me. Spending so much time with them, especially as they age, has shown me that with each subsequent generation coming of age, the idea of community has degraded. We don't, know our neighbors anymore. Shortly after this album's release, Robbie said, quote, "In my time, I've run up against some old people who were able to explain things to me and make me see things in a way that nobody else could. Their experience made me feel like not saying a word. I learned to listen." With this deep divide between the boomers and their silent generation parents, When You Awake is a song about bridging the gap between generations. This is a core theme of the Brown album. Kind of like Graham Nash did with Teach Your Children, right? The narrator of When You Awake remembers wisdom that his grandpa imparted on him. For instance, when you reach a fork in the road, you can take to the left or go straight to the right. Use your days and save your nights. And if you take the wrong path and the world isn't kind to you, read the writing on the wall. Most importantly, count your blessings. Ain't no reason to hang my head. I could wake up in the morning dead. Me again. Hey. When episodes are unexpectedly delayed, some awesome and totally off-the-cuff things can come together. The following contribution is one of them.
Hi there, I am Fathom from Vinyl Friday, and I am here today to talk to you about some things that I love about Up on Cripple Creek by the band. The characteristics of this song tend to fall into two camps. We've got our funky swamp, and then we've got our roots rock. And I think the magic of this song is in the juxtaposition of those two elements. So we'll start with the funky swamp. This part of the song is characterized by a bit of twangy guitar. There's also a lovely fluttery snare sound on this track. It recalls, in an abstract sort of way, some of the drum work by James Brown's drummer. Get a drummer song! All right! Get a drummer song! Whose name I've forgotten, but my editor will put it here. Levon's got a similar kind of finesse to his use of that particular drum, the snare. Many drummers just thwack it. Bam! On the 2 and 4. But in certain disciplines, you find this especially in jazz and, notably, in funk, the treatment of the snare drum is a lot more nuanced. I think that Levon is using this to great effect on this track. This organ, which gives it a very southern gospel feel. And, most important, this really early example of a clavinet that's played through a wah pedal. We now think of that sound as a Stevie Wonder trademark. You can hear that on tracks like Higher Ground. But Up on Cripple Creek obviously precedes that by several years. So in that way, it was sort of ahead of its time. And that is one of the qualities of the song that gives it a real sense of funk. The other is the bass, and we will come to that shortly. There's something very froggy about the combination of the clavinet and the wah-wah pedal. It makes it sound like you're in a swamp. And it is a quality that is especially well suited to the feel of this song. It gives it an almost zydeco sensibility. And finally, the main driver of the funk on this track is the bass. And maybe even more than that, it's the space in the bass line, because the gaps can be just as important, if not more so, than the notes themselves. Maybe we should go to our bass correspondent, who can probably explain this better than I can. Hello, it's me, the bass correspondent for Vinyl Friday. There are quite a few things that make this bass line funky, and I will try to break them down for you as efficiently as possible. The first thing is the gaps that were just alluded to. Let's take the verses as an example. The rhythm is about here, and the bass line goes. So lots and lots of space between those notes. And that breathing room gives you space to dance. You know what I mean? The second thing is that very occasionally there are ghost notes that are being played. So instead of, we're getting that's not exactly what he's playing, but the ghost notes are the little rhythmic accents that aren't actual notes. It's this instead of this. The last thing is that the bass line is syncopating at the chorus to match the vocals, which sounds kind of like something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I don't have the speed. She defends me, a drunkard's dream.
Again, that's not exactly what's being played, but it is the vibe. It is in the vein of what's being played. There is a very improvised element to it, so I figure if it's good enough for the band, then it's good enough for me. I hope that helps to clarify the funk. And then we've got our roots rock feel. This is what makes the song feel kind of rustic. It's the very down-to-earth vocal.
Drunkard's dream, if I ever did see one.
You know, there's a lack of precision in those harmonies, but it is more than made up for with the enthusiasm, with the fervor behind the singing. And then, of course, you've just got an acoustic piano, and that's not to say that there isn't acoustic piano in funk. It's just that the way that this one is played feels less like gospel and a lot more like rock. And that means that you've got within the same song this very grounded acoustic piano and this very space-age clavie-wah sound. These two elements in combination make the song feel simultaneously salt of the earth and also freak flag. So there you have it. Some things to love about Up on Cripple Creek by the band. Back to you, Abby.
What really interests me about Cripple Creek is that there is no lead instrument. Listen, Richard on piano and Robbie's guitar kind of live together, mush into one, and keep the choruses ascending. The closest thing there is to a lead instrument is the drums. It's kind of amazing that singing and drumming didn't mix Levon up, and it didn't because A, Cripple Creek is in halftime, B, Levon played with what he was singing instead of against it, and C, he got this hand out of the way of the backbeat.
1, 2, 3, or rather 1, 2, 3, 4.
So not like traditional form where you're tight down here in your lap. I think he did this so he'd have that visual cue for when he sang. Bessie and the narrator get into all sorts of shit. Up on Cripple Creek, she sends me. If I spring a leak, she mends me. I don't have to speak, she defends me. A drunkard's dream if I ever did see one. This is a pretty equal relationship here, if not the woman wearing the pants. It is she who talks them out of trouble. She who fixes up the car. Again, Levon has charisma in spades to hoot and holler about his little Bessie. He even takes a yodeling solo. Closing out side one, Whispering Pines is a gorgeous, sensitive, lonesome ballad from our king of ballads in the band, Richard. Foghorn through the night, calling out to sea, protect my only light, for she once belonged to me. Our country boy has found a job as a lighthouse keeper. There's lots of imagery of rising tides, seagulls, pools. The arrangement ebbs and flows to feel like water. Listen to how Richard's piano and Garth's organ move. There's this long tradition in country music and the blues of lamenting a place lost. Our narrator is missing his whispering pines and the lady he left there. What settles our narrator is his love. I will wait until it all goes round. With you in sight, the lost are found. Garth learned how to play from working in his uncle's funeral home, crazy lore drop there, and playing in church. This manner of playing, not so outright church, but a complex and in a reverent tone, makes it so that our narrator might be singing about his God, too. I can feel you standing there, but I don't see you anywhere. The final verse changes point of view as Levon and I think Rick as well come in. They sing in a vocal round, also coming from the church. Standing by the well, wishing for rains, reaching to the clouds, for nothing remains. We're out of the lighthouse and into an empty house in the cold, cold sun. The loneliness has followed the keeper home. This is kind of Richard's I Shall Be Released on the Brown album. He was given these songs to sing about a lone man in isolation. And he had that tenderness about his voice, especially in the falsetto range, that helped him deliver them so well. Jemima Surrender is about a guy saying all sorts of stuff to get this lady to sleep with him. He is trying everything. He'll play his guitar, he'll take her far away, they'll change their names, and he's being quite forward. If I were a barker in a girly show, tell you what I'd do. I'd lock the door, tear my shirt, and let the river flow. This is a driving old school rocker with the saxophone coming in with the electric guitar. Saxophones used to be a rock and roll instrument. Back in the Hawks days. It's a nod to their rockabilly roots. Jemima is unassuming in the grand scheme, but it reveals a lot of the band's strengths. They wanted to achieve, quote, a kind of woody, thuddy sound with this LP, and they went to great lengths to get this thud instead of a thack. You can hear the thud on this fantastic roll about halfway through Jemima. They achieved this thud by taping up the bottom of Levon's snare. Also, we have a super flat, dead bass sound throughout the record. Rick said, I don't play bass, I just cover space. Quote, it's not really what you play, but what you leave out that counts. If everyone is just up there churning, it's going to sound like buttermilk. Rockin' Chair and Cleveland are the two weakest cuts on the LP. The former is about a 73-year-old sailor who's come home to old Virginia to live out the rest of his days with his best friend Ragtime Willie. The latter's about a tornado. But this is a testament to the album's quality, as Rockin' Chair is still a beautiful duet between Levon and Richard, and Cleveland is a real rocker. Robbie just about revives the Hawks level of energy with a driving riff and his licks, and Richard even sneaks in some Jerry Lee Lewis piano. As much as Dixie Makes Me Think, When You Awake Moves Me, and Cripple Creek is just stupidly catchy, Jawbone is my favorite song on this album, and I love it for just how weird it is. The rest of the album sounds inviting, it sounds pretty, it was recorded well, it sounds warm, there's lots of studio magic, and then you have Jawbone. It's the closest to lo-fi the band ever got. If it sounds like it was recorded in a bathroom, it's because it was. They stuck Richard and his microphone in the bathroom of the pool house, and I can't help but respect it. Richard rocks his vocal. He's known for his high falsetto, like on I Shall Be Released and Tears of Rage, but he had soul, man. Listen to how he riffs on the chorus and hits the high notes. He embodies the character of a no-good, crooked gambler. When he's not on the run, your name up on the post office wall, his partners are ratting on him and putting him back in the slammer. Pull off a job with an inside man who needs the cash and likes your plan, and you will know just who to thank when you land right back in the tank. He can't help it. I'm a thief, and I dig it. Few songs in the band's discography embody Rick's rare jazz quote quite like Jawbone. This thing is fucking impossible to count. I hear 3/4. I hear 4/4. I'm pretty sure there's a measure of 6/8 in there, but I honestly can't tell. I know for a fact that the choruses are in 12. Insane! Robbie plays a guitar solo. There's a key change. Garth is playing something that sounds like a cross between a harmonica and a synth. Who even knows how he did what he did? Robbie described Rick's voice as, quote, somewhere between the Tobacco Belt and Sam Cooke. Rick cut this Sam Cookish vocal in one take on Unfaithful Servant, telling a story of a servant caught either stealing from or otherwise betraying the trust of his boss lady. Regardless of action or intent, what's done is done. Unfaithful servant, you don't have to say you're sorry. If you done it just for the spite, or did you do it for the glory? Then the point of view switches to the servant himself. Goodbye to that country home, so long, lady I have known. He did what he did, and now he has to accept the consequences. Farewell to my other side. Knowing how the other half lives, so to speak, I'd best just take it in stride. One of the few features any group of instruments takes on this album comes in the form of a duet between, I believe, Garth on soprano sax and a baritone horn. It might just be the tuba played by John again. It's soulful and it's gorgeous. About the Pilgrim's Passage essay, Robbie said, I think that it's very cleverly written, but I have no idea what he is talking about. It's kind of beautiful, but he's telling me what I mean. That's dangerous work. I feel like I come dangerously close to that every episode I make, but especially with an insight like this. The memories will linger on, but the good old days, they're all gone. Talk about the accidental perfect lyric for the end of the 1960s, especially surrounding the events of the month or so before this album came out. This would have been a great note to end on. This album is all about the good old days, especially the days that weren't actually good. Our memories just sweetened them. A friend of mine argued that King Harvest is the roll credits song of the Brown album. I would have gone Jawbone for that route, but this song is the thematic end. A farmer's crops have failed, and he doesn't know what comes next. He considers getting a job at the mill, but what if the mill shuts down? He could move to the big city and get a factory job, or he could join a union. There are anguished drums. Robbie played the solo through the lowest possible volume on his amp. It's anxious and unsettled. Something lurks under the surface. Again, accidentally perfect for the circumstances this album was born into, and we all became more suspicious of each other. What made the band stand out, aside from their dress and their tunes, was their fundamental understanding of each other as players. They shared this common ground of country music, which was effectively Canada's pirate radio back then, and rock and roll. Both players and producer understand the space of the whole composition. This is a big group with a remarkably even distribution of talent. A conscious effort to make all these brains fit in the same skull. It requires nuance and restraint. This is a thrilling balancing act while making you feel at home in the grooves. It's interesting to contrast that with some other stuff that's going on. Modern outlaw films Midnight Cowboy and Easy Rider came out the same year as this album, along with classic westerns Butch Cassidy and True Grit. We were obsessed with looking back into America's fictional past and bringing it into the present. What we brought was the feeling of being outlaws, outside the community, and the strong bond between two male leads. Fitting a title as America or Harvest could have been, as put by Stephen Hayden for Pitchfork, quote, "This record needed to be called The Band because it's about the band. How these men worked together, the way their personalities intersected and completed each other, the very architecture of their friendship." For this moment in time, and not long after, the band fundamentally understood each other. in an increasingly isolated, individualist world, a friendship between 5 men is rare and beautiful. I actually have to get something from the other room to round this out, so if you could excuse me for a moment. Personal copy of Mystery Train. I'll defer to an annotation the previous owner of this book left. What it means to be a band, a group who has lived together. My personal favorites off this one are Across the Great Divide, Rag Mama Rag, Dixie, When You Awake, Cripple Creek, Jawbone, and Unfaithful Servant. Remember, if you want to keep up with all of my favorites from all the Vinyl Mondays, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description. I update it every week. And that is it! That is the Brown Album. What do you think of this album? What do you think of the band? Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about albums that I love, and remember, despite what some guy on the internet says, your opinion matters. If you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday, Monday mornings at 11, a new episode of my podcast every other Friday at noon, and if you so choose, you can become a member of the freaking Peanut Gallery, my Patreon, where you get uncensored, extended, ad-free versions of these videos, by virtue of how the YouTube copyright system works. Man, is that gonna come in handy with our next Vinyl Monday pick! And a monthly bonus video. It gives a little extra support to what I do. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!